joined by Rene Amirault of Secure. Just start with a basic question for people that aren't as familiar with the ins and outs of the industry. What are energy services and how do you fit into this landscape?
Yeah, great question in terms of we've been around for all of 17 years, started in 2000, it'll be 17 years next year, started in 2007 and March 2007, and really tried to develop a company that was there to help the oil and gas industry, and which is now involved into many industries, mining and industrial. But the premise was that we wanted to be an environmental company. We wanted to be involved with waste management, the byproducts of the oil and gas, but we also wanted to be involved in some of the proactive practices of how do you actually reduce your environmental footprint. And this was back before ESG was sexy.
Long before the Paris Agreement,
all the above. But to give testament to our customers, they were also willing participants in that they could see the old practices of 30, 40, 50 years ago were causing, liabilities that they didn't want to, have in the future. So there was I think, a mutual interest there. How could we work together? We also wanted to help them in just the day-to-day production. So, the simple things that look simple but are complicated is, as you produce the oil and natural gas, there's also water byproducts. Mm-hmm. There's waste that gets built up. And so handling that day-to-day production waste as well. And then finally, we're helping with some of the remediation and the reclamation of their wells as they became suspended to abandonment, and finally putting it back to what nature was there before.
The narrative we hear today, certainly from a lot of people in government and even more so in environmental NGOs, is that the industry is the problem to the environment and the government is the solution. So that doesn't square with the story you've just told of the industry taking a leading role on this. So what are people missing in this discussion?
Yeah, first of all, reading headlines or reading biased statements versus getting out there and actually seeing what's going on is perception versus reality. And so I've had the luxury of, because Secure has been very successful, wanting to expand all around the world. And whether you go to Texas or you could go to Kazakhstan or you go to the Middle East, it doesn't matter. Colombia, Canada has not only the best regulations, but the best regulations that are followed. There's a lot of countries that have good regulations, but they're not enforced. So it's all about not only having good regulations, but also following. But the great thing about our industry was that right from day one, industry had input and bought into the new regulations, so they didn't fight them. And so as time developed, they could see the benefits of stricter environmental regulations was actually better for the business long term. So before the whole ESG theme started to come about, our customers were asking us to help them be more proactive with any type of environmental aspects of the business. And you look at the environmental footprint that was around 50, even 15 years ago versus today, drilling 8 to 12 wells on one pad versus, having 8 or 12 leases. All that is now on one lease, so, and then the pipeline coming from there to get the oil or gas to the processing plant to get it to the market, huge smaller footprint. Everybody's worked together in terms of reducing emissions. We've been doing a lot of things. A lot of product was moved by truck. Now that's pipeline connected. So you're taking trucks off the road that burn diesel, but you're also, from a safety aspect, you're not worried about all these trucks on different roads and highways. So all these little things are adding up to reducing the overall emissions intensity. It's also reducing their long-term liabilities. So it's a win-win. There's not, this is costing us more business. It's actually the right thing for not only the planet Earth, but for their business. And we've been able to create a business where we're adding value to the customers. And so that's where it becomes a win-win.
I know the words themselves are fraught, but we have the government articulating this so-called just transition that basically imagines a future without the oil and gas sector. And there are very real-world consequences to that. And really, the stated objectives, I go back to what we were talking about a few moments ago, are things that you're saying the industry has already been committed to. So where is the breakdown here? And why has that work not really been rewarded by governments, not just in Canada, but around the world. We're seeing a lot of the same.
Yeah, I think when, I look at it no differently than someone picks up a new religion. I'm not going to be able to convince them to change religion. So if you have open-minded people that want to get away from the big cities and come and walk, in footsteps, and actually see what's going on. And most of our visitors that have come from other countries are astonished to see the cleanliness, the how we have all this environmental protection. We do sometimes 2-3 different liners to protect the earth. We have all these gas blanket system to reduce emissions and make sure that they don't go in the atmosphere. So when people actually get out there and touch it and feel it, they come away with a whole different story. And this even goes to the investment world, which, you hear about, not wanting to invest in oil and gas. A lot of our investors, we encourage them to go to the field and see what's going on and come away with a totally different perspective as opposed to reading headlines in a newspaper or a TV show.
Well, and I think that's why this series has been so valuable in these conversations, because there are a lot of Canadians that I don't think know one way or another. So they're probably open-minded, and the first person or the loudest person to give them their position is probably the one that they'll take. So I'll ask, I guess, more of a general question here. I mean, what is it you think Canadians who are not connected to this industry need to know about it?
Well, I think first of all, they can sleep at night knowing that the Canadian oil and gas industry has the best environmental regulations and the best standards in the world. So bar none. I've seen them. I've been there. Bar none. Second of all, this industry is not resting on its laurels. It's saying, okay, we're going to stay number one for a long, long time. So how do we capture CO2? How do we reduce further emissions? How do we make things more efficient?
And that's been a market-led process.
Yeah, and that has nothing to do with government. That has to do with the DNA of our oil and gas industry. And then secondly, as we've seen, and we have the coastal LNG pipeline going to Kitimat. We have the TMX coming up. We're going to be able to not only do that for North America, but if you can start exporting that around the world, it begs the question that if you can get more Canadian energy around the world, i.e. exported, then you're not only having high environmental standards, but you've got lower emissions, and you're replacing production from a Nigeria or Venezuela. Never mind all the ethical boundaries around being a democratic versus non-democratic and suppressing freedom. So, I mean, I would just, all I ask is people to get the facts. Just get the facts, and if you want, please come out and see it. But just get the facts, and then at least then make your judgment.
Rene Amirault, Secure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.